The vault had not been opened in 27 years. Deep inside Kensington Palace, behind layers of security so secret that even most royal staff didn't know they existed, sat a locked steel box. Inside, there was a single document, handwritten and sealed with wax, bearing the Prince of Wales insignia from decades ago. Only 3 people had ever known what the document contained: the king himself, the archbishop who had witnessed it, and now Prince William, who had finally decided it was time to break the seal. What was written on that solitary page had been guarded more carefully than state intelligence, more closely than any royal scandal, and with a weight that had haunted the palace walls for years. It was a promise made beside a coffin, whispered in the shadow of death, sworn in a moment of raw grief that would haunt the king for the rest of his life. When Princess Diana's body lay in state, Charles had done something nobody knew. He had written down promises about truth, about his sons, about secrets that had been buried with their mother, hidden away in plain sight, but locked from the world. But time has a way of letting people forget, or conveniently ignore, their promises. What could Charles possibly have promised beside Diana's coffin? What truths had Evie vowed to reveal? And why, after nearly 3 decades, was William finally forcing those promises into the light? Stay close, because what you are about to uncover will shake everything you thought you knew about Diana's death, about the brothers who had barely spoken in years, and about a king who swore an oath he may never have truly intended to keep. The discovery that started it all began with a phone call William was never meant to hear. He had arrived early at Clarence House for a scheduled meeting with his father about some upcoming royal duties. The meeting should have been routine, boring even, just a review of the calendar, coordination of appearances. William let himself in through the private entrance, as he always did, and walked toward his father's study, unaware that the moment he stepped inside history was already in motion. That was when he heard it. Charles's voice, sharp and agitated, carried from behind the closed door. William froze, hand hovering over the doorknob. His instincts screamed danger. Charles was speaking on the phone, voice tight with frustration. "I told you, the document stays sealed. No exceptions. I don't care what the lawyers say about disclosure requirements. That promise was personal and it stays private." Curiosity turned to alarm. What document? What promise? William stood frozen, knowing he should announce himself, but unable to move as his mind raced. Charles's voice dropped slightly, still audible. "If either of my sons ever learned what I wrote that day, it would destroy what little relationship we have left. Some truths are better, left buried with the dead." William's stomach dropped. Slowly, he backed away from the door, his mind spinning. He left Clarence House without announcing his presence. The scheduled meeting could wait. Right now, he needed to understand what his father was hiding. From the car, he called his private secretary with a careful, deliberate question. "Is there any documentation in the palace archives from the week of my mother's funeral that would be restricted or sealed?" The secretary promised to investigate discreetly. William waited, anxiety building with each passing hour. 2 days later, the answer arrived. There was indeed a sealed document, filed under the highest level of restricted access, dated just 3 days after Diana's passing. The document was classified as a personal memorandum from the then Prince of Wales, witnessed by the Archbishop of Canterbury, and marked not to be opened except by written permission from Charles himself, or by legal order following his death. His secretary added a warning. Attempting to access it without proper authorization would be nearly impossible. The restrictions were airtight. William knew he couldn't just demand to see it. His father would refuse, maybe even destroy it if he felt threatened. He needed leverage. He needed information that would force the king to open the vault willingly. So William began digging, quietly and meticulously, into the days surrounding his mother's death. He spoke with former staff present at the palace during that tragic week, reviewed archived schedules and official logs, and even reached out to the retired archbishop who had witnessed Charles's writing. The archbishop refused to share details, but confirmed the document existed. It contained vows Charles had made in the immediate aftermath of Diana's passing. Armed with this confirmation, William made a decisive choice. He would confront his father directly, not with accusations, but with a firm, unyielding request. He wanted to see the document. He wanted to understand the promises made beside his mother's coffin that fateful day. And if Charles refused, William was prepared to take legal action to secure its release. He was done with secrets and half-truths. His mother deserved better. He and Harry deserved better. The confrontation unfolded on a grey, tense afternoon in the King's private office at Buckingham Palace. William requested a meeting, giving no hint of the agenda. Charles agreed, reluctantly. The moment William walked in, he got straight to the point. "I know about the document you sealed after Mum died. I know you made promises, and I want to read what you wrote." Charles went pale, then flushed with anger and fear. "How did you find out about that? Does it matter?" William replied calmly. "It exists. You wrote it. I have a right to know what you promised her." Charles walked to the window, shoulders tense, pacing. Those were private thoughts, written in grief, never meant to be read by anyone. William stayed firm. "Then why have them witnessed and sealed in a vault? If they were just private, a diary would do. Or you could have destroyed them. You made them official. You made them a record. That means they matter." Charles turned, torn between anger and guilt. "What I wrote, it was a promise to myself as much as to her. A reminder of things I needed to fix." William leaned forward. "Then prove you kept those promises. Or admit you broke them and deal with the consequences." The argument lasted over an hour. Charles tried every deflection, every excuse. The document was too personal. It would dredge up old wounds. It would cause unnecessary pain. But William would not back down. Legal steps were on the table if necessary. The King understood. A court battle over Diana's sealed memorandum would ignite a media firestorm, exposing secrets the monarchy had protected for decades. Finally, worn down and exhausted, Charles relented. "Fine, you want to read it? We will go to the vault together. But understand this, William. Once you read what I wrote, you cannot unread it. Some of those promises involve truths about your mother that will hurt. Are you prepared for that?" William nodded, unwavering. "I have spent my entire life facing painful truths about my mother. One more will not break me. What will break me is living with secrets and lies." Charles stared at his son for a long moment, then picked up his phone. "I am bringing my son. We are opening the sealed memorandum from September 1997. There was a pause, as the person on the other end presumably expressed shock or concern, knowing the weight of what was about to be revealed, a secret that had slept in silence for nearly 3 decades. "Charles, cut them off. Just do it now." 20 minutes later, William and Charles stood in a climate-controlled vault deep beneath Buckingham Palace. The promises that had been broken lay before him, and as William read the document 3 times, each pass revealed new layers of betrayal, deceit, and broken trust. The promises were numbered, written in Charles's distinctive handwriting, each one dated and painstakingly precise. Promise 1 began simply enough. "I vow to tell William and Harry the complete truth about the night their mother died." Not the sanitized version. Literally everything I know about the circumstances, the security failures, the decisions made that night. And when they are old enough to understand, I will sit them down and answer every question they have, with no lies and no omissions. William's hands clenched the paper tighter. That conversation had never happened. Not when he turned 18, not when he turned 21, not ever. His father had only ever discussed Diana's death in vague, general terms over the years. He had always deflected specific questions, maintaining the official narrative while deliberately leaving gaps where the truth should have been. Any attempt William or Harry had made to dig deeper had been shut down, brushed off with claims that it was too painful to revisit or that they already knew everything there was to know. But according to this, Charles had information he had deliberately withheld. What exactly had been kept from them? What truths had been buried? Promise 2, cut even deeper. "I vow to support and maintain the relationship between William and Harry, no matter what conflicts arise between them. I will never take sides. I will never allow them to become estranged. As I became estranged from my own siblings, their mother wanted above all else for them to remain close. I will honor that wish, even when it is difficult or inconvenient for me." William let out a bitter, hollow laugh that echoed through the silent, climate-controlled vault. This promise had been shattered so completely that it almost seemed surreal to read. Charles had absolutely taken sides during the breakdown of William and Harry's relationship. He had frozen Harry out, supported William's position as heir without question, and made no real effort to mediate or heal the rift between his sons. Diana's wish for her boys to stay united had been discarded the moment it became politically inconvenient, erased by the pressures of protocol, perception, and ambition. Promise 3 revealed something William had never known. I vow to ensure that Diana's voice and values remain central to how William and Harry are raised and how they conduct themselves as royals. I will not allow the institution to erase her influence or dismiss her approach to royal duty. William's mind drifted back to his childhood, the warmth, accessibility, and humanity that Diana had brought to royal life had been systematically stripped away over the years, replaced by rigid formality and distance. Catherine had helped him reclaim some of that lost connection, but it had been despite the institution, not because of it. His father had allowed Diana's influence to be quietly erased, as though it were a threat to the image of the monarchy rather than the heartbeat of the family itself. Promise 4 was the most explosive. I vow to reveal to William and Harry, when they are adults, the full truth about my relationship with their mother, the affairs, the timeline of when my relationship with Camilla resumed, and the pressures from the institution that contributed to the breakdown of our marriage. They deserve to know that their mother was not blameless, but neither was I. They deserve the complete picture so they can make their own judgments without the distortion of public speculation and tabloid lies. William's jaw tightened, muscles clenching. This promise hurt more than any other. For years, he had pieced together his parents' marriage from fragments, rumours, media reports, and gossip. He had never received an honest, direct account from his father. He had been left to navigate a maze of partial truths and assumptions, never sure what was real or fabricated. And now, here it was in black and white, signed and witnessed, the record of what had been promised but never delivered. There were other promises. Smaller, but still significant. Charles had vowed to protect Diana's legacy from institutional interference, maintain relationships with her family even when it was awkward or inconvenient, and ensure that both sons had access to their mother's personal belongings and letters, items that could provide context, understanding, and a glimpse into who she really was beyond her public image. Each promise William read had been broken or ignored, not necessarily through malice, but slowly, methodically, by the erosion of intention under the weight of time, duty, and personal convenience. William finally lifted his gaze from the pages, his face a mask of controlled rage. "When were you planning to honour any of this?" Charles met his son's eyes, genuine shame for the first time clear in his expression. "I intended to, at first. I truly did. But then time passed, and it became easier to leave things alone, not to reopen wounds, to maintain the version of events everyone had accepted." William's voice was ice cold. "You mean it became easier for you, more convenient and less uncomfortable?" Charles flinched but remained silent. "Perhaps that is true. I am not proud of it. I convinced myself that protecting you both from painful truths was the compassionate choice." William rose abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. "You convinced yourself of a lie, and now I have to decide what to do with this." Charles went pale. "What do you mean?" William held up the pages. "These promises were witnessed. They are more than private thoughts. They are a matter of record. That means I could make them public. I could tell the world that the king swore an oath beside my mother's coffin and then broke every single part of it. People would know the truth of what you promised and failed to deliver, and once they knew, there would be no going back." The vault seemed to close in around them, the temperature controlled, the silence almost oppressive. Each word, each broken vow hung heavily between them, unspoken yet undeniable. William's mind raced. He could release the details, expose the failures, reveal the lies, but doing so would shake the monarchy itself to its core. And yet, the personal betrayal, the years of secrecy, demanded acknowledgement. He lowered the papers slightly, his eyes never leaving his father. "You swore these promises beside her coffin. You made them official, and yet you let time, convenience, and fear destroy them. That's not protection. That's betrayal. And now, I must decide what comes next. For their mother, for Harry, and for me." Charles swallowed, the weight of the record pressing down. There was no excuse, no room for deflection, no words that could erase what was written. The promises existed, witnesses existed. And now, in the hands of William, the consequences could no longer be contained or ignored. The silence that followed was suffocating. Charles seemed to age 10 years in that single moment. "You would destroy me," he finally whispered, but William's response was quiet, precise, and devastating. "You destroyed these promises. I am just considering whether the world deserves to know that. Charles sank into a chair, head in his hands, the weight of years of secrecy pressing down like a physical force. What do you want from me, William? An apology? Public humiliation? Charles asked, his voice strained. William sat back down as his anger gave way to exhaustion, the tension in his shoulders slowly easing. I want the final and complete truth, he said, voice steady but heavy with the weight of years of doubt. I want you to fulfill these promises, even if it is decades late. I want to know everything you vowed to tell me about Mom's death. I want to understand what really happened in your marriage. And most of all, I want your help fixing what you allowed to break between me and Harry. Charles looked up, eyes glistening. Some of those promises may be impossible to keep now. Too much time has passed. Too much damage has been done. William nodded slowly before replying, his voice unwavering. Then we start with what is possible, and we accept that some damage may be permanent. But I will not let this document go back into that vault and be forgotten for another 27 years. You made these vows, William added, his tone razor-sharp. Now live up to them, or admit you cannot. The truth about that night, the first promise of telling William the complete truth about the night Diana died, was no doubt the hardest. They met again 3 days later, this time at Highgrove, far from staff and official residences, in a place where they could speak freely without fear of being overheard. Charles had brought files, documents he had kept private all these years. Charles began slowly, his voice heavy, soaked in grief that had never fully healed. Your mother called me that night, hours before the crash. You did not know that, did you? William shook his head, throat tightening visibly. She was in Paris with Doty, Charles continued, voice breaking slightly. She was angry, not at me personally, but at the situation as a whole. The paparazzi had been relentless. She felt hunted. She told me she was going to do something dramatic to get away from them. I told her to be careful, to let her security team do their job. She laughed, Charles added, the memory raw and vivid. She said her security team was the problem, that she just wanted one night of freedom. William listened carefully, hands gripping so tightly that his knuckles turned white. And you never told anyone this, he murmured. Charles shook his head. I told the investigators, but they deemed it irrelevant to the inquiry. It did not change the facts of what happened, but it has haunted me ever since. I constantly wonder if I should have said something different, if I should have insisted she come home immediately, if I could have prevented what happened next. Charles opened one of the files and showed William the security reports from that night. They detailed chaos, lack of coordination, and the decision to use a driver who had been drinking. But there was something more disturbing. Diana's regular protection officers had been dismissed weeks earlier at her own request. She had wanted more privacy, less oversight. The substitutes brought in were less experienced, less assertive, and while they tried to advise against certain decisions that night, they were overruled. The palace had been aware of these security weaknesses, Charles said miserably, but had not intervened because Diana was no longer officially part of the royal family. William absorbed this information in silence, mind racing through implications he had never considered. So you're saying she made choices that put herself at risk? William said slowly. But you also allowed her to be in a position where she could make those choices without proper protection. Charles nodded miserably. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. We were all responsible in different ways. She wanted freedom. I wanted distance. The institution wanted to forget she existed. And together, all of those desires created a situation where she was vulnerable. William's anger flared again. And you never thought we deserved to know. You let us believe it was just a tragic accident, easier than explaining the complexity of what actually happened. Charles pulled out another document, a transcript of a phone call Diana had made to her brother just days before her death. In it, she expressed fears about her safety, not paranoia, but legitimate concerns based on her experiences. Strange cars are following her. She felt her movements were being monitored, Charles explained. She had reported these fears to the police, but nothing came of it. The palace had been informed, but dismissed it as Diana being dramatic. Charles's voice cracked as he admitted, I did not take her fears seriously enough. None of us did. And then she died, and those fears looked prescient. I had to live with the knowledge that I failed to protect her. Even after their marriage ended, William stood and walked to the window, back to his father, trying to process everything he was learning. This was not a simple story of a car crash caused by paparazzi. It was a cascading series of failures, choices, and negligence that had created the conditions for tragedy. His mother had been let down by everyone who should have kept her safe, including his father. After a long, suffocating silence, William asked the question that had haunted him for decades. "Do you think it was just an accident? Or do you think someone wanted her dead?" Charles answered carefully. The official investigations concluded it was an accident, excessive speed, alcohol, lack of seatbelts, paparazzi pursuit, all contributing factors. But do I think there were people who would have benefited from her death? Yes. Do I think the security failures were entirely accidental? I have doubts. Can I prove anything beyond the official findings? No. It was not the answer William wanted, but it was honest and even more truthful than anything his father had told him before. They talked for hours that day, going through every document, every timeline, every detail Charles had hidden for decades. By the end, William did not have complete closure, but he had something he had never had before: clarity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they prepared to part ways. William asked one final question, voice soft but unwavering. "Why did you keep all this from us? Why let us grow up not knowing?" Charles's answer was simple, heartbreaking. "I was afraid that if you knew the whole truth, you would hate me for my part in it. I could not bear that. So I stayed silent and told myself it was for your protection, when really, it was for mine." William did not respond. Instead, he gathered the documents Charles had shown him and prepared to leave. But before he walked out, he turned back. "You owe Harry the same conversation. Everything you just told me. He deserves to hear it. Will you do that?" The brother he lost, the second promise Charles had broken, about keeping William and Harry together, would require more than telling the truth. It would require action, mediation, and a willingness to confront the painful reality of how broken things had become. William had not spoken to Harry in over 8 months. Their last conversation had ended badly, with accusations and hurt feelings that only deepened the divide. Harry was living in California, building a life completely separate from the royal family, and seemed to have no interest in reconciliation. But the Coffin promise had been crystal clear, and Charles had vowed to keep his sons united no matter what. William intended to hold his father to that, even if it meant forcing a conversation no one wanted to have. He told his father plainly, "You promised Mom you would not let us become estranged, but you have done nothing to prevent that. Now you need to fix it." Charles protested immediately. "Harry lives on another continent. He has made his choices, and I cannot force him to come back home." William's response was sharp, unwavering. "You are the king. You have resources, influence, and the ability to bring people together if you actually try. So, try, or admit the promise meant nothing to you." After a pause, King Charles reluctantly agreed to reach out to his son, Harry. The initial contact was awkward, filled with suspicion. Harry questioned why his father was suddenly interested in playing peacemaker after so many years of distance. But when Charles explained that William had unsealed a secret and insisted the family honor it, Harry's attitude shifted immediately. He agreed to a meeting, but only on neutral ground, away from palace officials and media, somewhere they could speak honestly, openly, without cameras looming over them. They settled on a private estate in Scotland. The meeting was scheduled for the following weekend. William arrived first, his anxiety evident despite attempts to appear calm. Charles came next, looking older and more worn than William had seen him in days. Finally, Harry arrived, his expression guarded and defensive, clearly uncertain about what he was walking into and bracing himself for confrontation. They sat in a room with a fireplace, the only warmth against the cold Scottish weather, and for several minutes nobody spoke. The silence was thick with years of hurt, misunderstanding and simmering anger, until Charles began. "I asked you both here because I made promises when your mother died," he said quietly. "Promises I have not kept. William has rightfully called me out for that failure. One of those promises was that I would never allow you to become estranged, that I would do everything in my power to keep you together, because that is what she wanted more than anything." Harry's expression remained closed, tense. Charles continued, "And yet here we are, estranged. So, what exactly are you planning to do about it?" He looked between his sons. "I am planning to be completely honest about my failures and the ways I contributed to this divide. Then I will step back and let you two talk without me interfering." What followed was the most emotionally raw conversation the three of them had ever had. Charles admitted he had somehow favoured William because he was the heir, and that favouritism had bred resentment in Harry. He admitted he had not protected Harry from institutional pressures as he should have, and that he had allowed palace politics to drive wedges between his sons because it was easier than fighting the system. Each admission was painful, dragging old wounds into the open for the first time in years. When King Charles finished, he stood and walked to the door. "I will leave you two alone now," he said. "You need to talk without me here. But before I go, know this. Your mother loved you both equally and fiercely. She would be heartbroken by this division, and so am I. Whatever anger you have toward each other or toward me, do not let it destroy what you once had." He left quietly, closing the door behind him. William and Harry were alone for the first time in over a year. The silence immediately stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, Harry spoke, voice thick with emotion. "Do you remember when we were kids, and Mom used to make us promise we would always have each other's backs?" William nodded, eyes damp. "Every night before bed, no matter what happens, you two stick together." Harry laughed bitterly. "We really failed at that, didn't we?" William looked at his brother, really looked at him, seeing past the anger and defensiveness to the person he had grown up with. "We did," he admitted, "but maybe it's not too late to fix it." They talked for hours, unpacking grievances and misunderstandings that had piled up over years. Harry expressed frustration at always being the spare, the afterthought, the one whose life was considered less important. William admitted he had never fully understood the pressure Harry felt, because his own role had been so clearly defined from birth. Harry talked about feeling abandoned when William married and started his own family, about feeling as if he had lost his only true ally. William confessed that he had resented Harry for leaving and for choosing his own happiness over duty, though part of him admired that courage. The conversation was raw, tense, and far from easy. Hours later, when Charles returned, he found the sons sitting together, not relaxed, but no longer hostile. The tension had shifted, opening a path toward reconciliation. By the time William spoke of the unsealing, everything changed. William made a decision that surprised everyone, even himself. He was going to make the Coffin promise public, not the entire document. Some parts were too personal, too painful, but the core promises about truth, family unity, and honouring Diana's legacy would be revealed. King Charles begged him to reconsider, but William was adamant. "These promises were made in Diana's name," William explained, "and the public who loved her deserves to know they existed. We are finally honouring them." The announcement was carefully planned, made from the same chair where he had previously recorded emotional statements about mental health and the woman named Rose. But this time, his demeanour was different, more resolved, composed, and less broken. He spoke with quiet intensity. "I want to tell you about a document that was sealed 27 years ago, and a promise my father made beside my mother's coffin. A promise that was witnessed, locked away, and largely forgotten until recently." He explained how he discovered it, forced its unsealing, and what he had found inside. He spoke about promises regarding the truth, about his mother's death, keeping him and Harry united, and honouring her values, and how those promises had been broken over time. William did not use the statement to attack the king. Instead, he spoke with measured compassion about grief, time, and institutional pressure, and how these forces had caused the promises to fade. His purpose in revealing them was not to shame anyone, but to finally honour what should have been honoured. "All along, my father made these promises with the best intentions," William said, "but life made them harder to keep than he anticipated. Now, together, we are working to fulfil them, even if decades late." He then addressed Harry directly. "My brother and I have been estranged for far too long. Our mother would hate what has become of our relationship. Thanks to the Coffin promise, we are finally addressing that, talking again, working through years of hurt. It will take time, but we are committed to honouring what Mom wanted for us, unity and mutual support." Charles issued his own statement shortly after William's, a brief but heartfelt apology. "I made promises I did not keep, and I allowed time and circumstance to erode commitments I should have held sacred. My son was right to force me to confront this failure. I am grateful for his courage and determination to honour his mother's memory properly. We are a family, trying to heal old wounds and do better moving forward. I ask for understanding as we navigate this process." They left flowers together and walked away, not as a perfect family, but as a healing one. The work of honouring Diana's memory and wishes was finally, genuinely underway. It was messy, complicated, and would probably never be fully resolved, but it was real. And what William thought as he looked at his brother and father beside him was what mattered most. It is the secret that was buried for nearly 3 decades and the promises that changed a family forever. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more royal stories, share this video with friends, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Nobody else will tell you more truth like this. Truth is coming soon. See you in the next video.